Like, I have feelings for this person, and I'm listening to him talk about his feelings for somebody else. And the minute my stop came first for the bus, the minute I turned my back to him, okay, and he could not see my face, the minute he couldn't see my face anymore, boom, waterworks. Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of To the Girl, where my heavily pregnant self shares some wisdom / advice that I wish that I could tell my younger self. I wish I had a time machine. Some of you guys might recognize me from my other channel, 𝐂𝐇𝐀𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐋. If you guys don't, that's very good, because on this channel, I'm known as Faye. Baji Faye, no Tazzy. On this channel, we get deep, we chit chat, we talk about things that are hopefully relatable, useful for you. In today's episode, to kick it all off, I'm gonna talk about being a good girl with a broken heart. So go ahead, get your tea, get your coffee, get your water. Maybe you're putting away laundry, maybe you're driving to work. I don't know, whatever you gotta do. Just get in the zone and let's get into it. Now, before we get into the pieces of wisdom, the little nuggets of advice or things, whatever, I feel like we need to define what a good girl is, because I think that means different things to different people. It definitely varies based on your cultural or religious upbringing. For me, it means something very specific, right? Like if I talk to another Pakistani American or Muslim American person, I'm like, she's a good girl. We know what that means. But again, that's even on a spectrum. So I'm talking about someone who keeps their purity. Okay, they're not really a rule breaker. When I'm telling these stories and when I'm talking about talking to my younger self, I'm talking to a girl who, I was a good girl. Okay, I didn't mess around with men. A little background: I actually went to an Islamic school, private Islamic school, for probably like 10 years of my life. And then from there, I went to an all-girls school. So I had crushes on guys throughout the years, but there was no real like love interest. There wasn't like a main character in my life. And I would say that's pretty much the same for a lot of my friends as well, who were Muslim and kind of like in that good girl category. And then we get to college, and I think that's when boys become like a central theme in your life, because you go from like Islamic school to all girls school, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're in the #1 party school in America. That's what happened to me. It was a big culture shock. I kind of just want to share all that before I get into it, just to give some context, because I think it's important. And I know that a lot of you guys who maybe are already part of my audience get a lot of these things, but anyway, over explaining. The first point, the first piece of wisdom, the first nugget of advice is that you will probably fall for people who are more experienced in having relationships than you, and it's gonna suck. When you are a good girl, you kind of are a naive, okay? You're a naive person. And sometimes you may not completely understand that most people are not good girls or guys. I met a lot of people, even through this transition when I got to college, who are not as like innocent as I was. So when I get to college, there was this guy who was in a lot of my classes, and I'll just say I became attached to him. Okay, the feelings happen, which I'll get into, but yeah, it was the first guy like that I really, really started to like. I would say the first like love interest, because like I mentioned, I mean, besides like crushes in middle school and in elementary school, like I went to an all-girls school for 4 years, so like there wasn't really like a main character. This guy kind of became main character. But even with him, I remember I met this other Pakistani girl who I was trying to make friends when I moved out to college, and she's just like casually telling me a story. And she's just like, yeah, like, I think his name came up, and she was like, yeah, we made out at a party over the summer. Like in my head, I was like, oh, okay. Like I was like playing it cool when she said that, but really deep in my mind, I was like on the mouth, like what? I was so like just taken aback by that, right? Because I feel like up until that point, I just assumed a lot of Muslim people didn't really like engage in any of that stuff. When you're like that and you're growing up in the West, you start falling for somebody and they have experience and you don't, right? In relationships or whatever, doing physical things or whatever. And the reason why I say that this all sucks is because what ended up happening with this person is that I started to have feelings, and I didn't have a lot of experience. So you start to have feelings for somebody who is open and free and will do stuff with other people, but you aren't like that. Right? So just to give you guys some more context, I'll never forget this bus ride. Okay. So let's say like after a whole semester, of not knowing that this person actually was still in love with somebody else. Yeah. Okay. This was kind of like also a little bit hidden from me. Other people knew. Apparently this person didn't want to tell me. We had this bus ride towards the end of the semester. It was the bus ride from hell. Okay. Let me tell you why. It was like an hour long or like 45-minute bus ride. And both of us are going, like, we have two different destinations. And he's actually going to go see that girl. Okay. And this is the time where he finally decides to tell me the truth. I had kind of heard rumors from like other people in our friend group, but like I never heard it from himself that, you know, he was in love with somebody or whatever. And man, I was so naive. Anyway, so I remember we're like taking this bus ride and we're going and like he's like telling me everything about this girl. Okay. He's telling me everything about this girl. And he's like, yeah, like I told her I love her and this and that. And I was like, oh, cool. Like you love her. Wow. That's so good for you. And I don't understand how I had the level of composure that I did, because I sat there for that many minutes listening to this guy. Okay. As like I have feelings for this person and I'm listening to him talk about his feelings for somebody else. And the minute my stop came first for the bus, the minute I turned my back to him, okay, and he could not see my face. The minute he couldn't see my face anymore, boom, waterworks. Okay. I couldn't even hold it. It just all started coming out and I cried so hard. When I look back at that, I want to just like go hug. I just want to go hug my old self. And like now I can laugh about it, right? It's like been so many years. I'm heavily pregnant. I've experienced a lot of other things in life. Okay. So anyway, I shared a lot of that, not just in vain. Okay. Listen, there's a point to all this. I'm tying it all back. But the point of what I'm trying to say is that unfortunately, when you're a good girl, you're wired differently. You're going to get attached to people. You don't talk to a ton of people, and it will be harder for you to not obsess over that, because you're not like for me in this scenario, I'm not like that other guy. That guy will go and flirt with anything that moves. That guy has his own heartbreak. He has his own list of girls that he's talking to and will talk to for the next however long. And I just was not wired that way. Right. And the other issue with that is that some people will even make you feel like those feelings that you feel, that heartbreak that you feel, it isn't real, because you're just like, you know, you're so innocent. You're just a good girl. They'll make you feel like your heartbreak is not as real as someone who's in an actual relationship. And to that, I will say this. Okay. Are you telling me that Kajal in Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, okay, you think her character, was she not in pain? Just because she wasn't in a relationship with Shah Rukh Khan, okay, their basketball was on. If you guys haven't seen that movie, please go watch the scene of them playing basketball. Okay, just type in Kuch Kuch K-U-C-H-K-U-C-H-Hota basketball. Please go search that. Okay, now we'll get back to the serious stuff, but I really want you guys to go watch that if you haven't. But my next point, going off of that, is that I want you to know that your heartbreak is real. I remember in our friend group, there was a guy, man, he was annoying. I don't like him. But I remember I was opening up to him about my situation, or this situation, which it hurt me. Okay. It hurt me at the time. Like, it was very painful. I had not been attached to anybody like that up until that point, you know? And I was like, I was what, like 18, 19? I don't know. I wasn't like a little baby, you know? But I remember this guy, like, I'm telling him about it, and he, stupid idiot, he's like, oh, so it wasn't a real heartbreak. And I was like, well, I feel like it hurts, you know, like it hurts. And his response to me was, yeah, but like you guys weren't in an actual relationship, so it's like not a real one. And I'm here for the good girls. I'm here for you. Okay. And I'm telling you this as a woman now. I've been with Munir for so long. Okay. We have been through breaks. We have been through losing loved ones, grief. Now we're going through pregnancy. I'm in like a real relationship. More real than some other people. But even I would not say that to somebody. I would not say that to somebody. So I'm here to validate you, to tell you that your heartbreak is still real. Yes, it may not be the same as somebody who goes and has a bunch of relationships, but understand that whatever you feel is still real, and that's okay. To be honest, on the contrary, I feel like sometimes actually suppressing all those feelings is worse. Like having an unrequited thing is worse. Someone tries to make you feel that way, I'm just here to say, no, that's not true. I also understand from a friend's perspective, there's a difference between wanting to help a friend not ruminate on a situation and, you know, giving them a reality check. And there's a difference between that and just flat out dismissing their pain. And if you're a good girl and you're going through something, even if you're not in a relationship, it does not mean that what you're feeling is not real. It's a real feeling. It's a real human emotion. The problem when I look back at that situation for me was that I feel like I was hung up on it for way too long. And it will drive you crazy as a good girl because you may think like, I don't deserve this, right? This is unfair. Why is this happening to me? It's not fair that it doesn't work both ways, right? And that gets me to my next point, which I feel like is an important one and something I wish I could tell myself. And that's that being a good girl is not going to save you from going through stuff. As human beings, I feel like a lot of us are very prideful. We think that we're above certain things. For me, I feel like I built an identity around being a good girl. So it drove me crazy that I was hung up and heartbroken while this person goes and flirts with anything that moves. But I'm not special. Okay, just because I think I'm a good girl or whatever, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that I'm immune to going through things that human beings go through. Because I think what happens is like, and some really religious people watching this might say this, like, well, if you didn't have a friendship with boys is haram, you wouldn't have experienced this. Well, I feel like sometimes religious people warn young people like, hey, if you sin, you're gonna suffer. And there's a difference between like saying like, okay, if you do bad, you're gonna get bad. And then there's a difference between that and like just having a tactic to control people. Like no one is immune to pain. Heartbreak is a part of life. It's part of the human experience. I don't really understand when people try to act like if you are this perfect thing, or they sell you this idea that if you act perfectly, you will never suffer, or like God won't test you or put you in situations. And I feel like that is a narrative that is pushed sometimes. But yeah, I think it's really important that you don't get so attached to this identity of being like, I'm good, so I don't deserve these things. You know, there's so many hijabis, there's so many weirdos who are so self-righteous, and maybe that included me at a certain point, but you gotta cut that shit out. You're not special just because you think you're a good girl. You're not gonna be immune to anything. And to be honest, there's even a lot of people who are like super religious who had some of the worst relationship situations that you can even think of. Like there are horror stories, okay, of people who like maybe never even talked to a guy and got married to like a crazy person and went by all the right avenues and all those things. So that being said, yeah, that's something that I wish I could tell my younger self. And another thing that I wish that I could tell myself, and not just myself, but like just young girls in general who, you know, kind of identify as a good girl. Listen, you're very susceptible to being taken advantage of, okay? And first of all, there are huge double standards for women in the Muslim and Desi communities. There is a very high risk for women getting involved in having failed relationships, their reputation being ruined. It's just not the same for a woman and a man. Like the playing field is not leveled. I can give you examples of things that happened to me in those college days that didn't happen to me, but like stuff that I saw to other people. Sorry, I said that wrong, but I can give you examples of things that happened in college that I saw happen to other girls. You know, there was a girl, she was full hijabi, okay? She was involved with somebody that I knew. This guy was literally showing her nude photos that she had sent him to everybody. I didn't personally see them. I had heard about this, and he was doing it like in a public space, like where we all used to gather and like hang out. He was showing her photos to everybody. Another example of something that I had heard of, there was another girl that I knew from my community growing up. And these are Muslim guys, by the way. These are not like these are Muslim people. These are everyone who I'm talking about is Muslim, including the perpetrators, I'll call them. There was a guy who put a girl on speakerphone and all his guy friends were listening, and he's asking her to validate, or he's like asking her like, oh, remember the time we did blah, 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 and making her validate like in front of all those people. She didn't know that all those people were listening, but was basically putting all their stuff on blast on what they had done physically. And when I look at a lot of these things, and you know, I also had friends who were taken advantage of, I feel like when girls are good girls, or just girls in general. Actually, this, now that I think about it, has nothing to do with being a good girl or not. But I do think that if you're a little bit more naive, it's easier to take advantage of you. You know, I was spared of a lot of this. I didn't go through any of this, alhamdulillah. So, you know, I don't have any villains in my story, but unless Munir's a villain. I'm just kidding. He's not. He trapped me. You know, even when I look at this other situation, like that person maybe could have been a villain. But when I look at it, I'm like, no, it's just like we were not compatible. It was not in the stars. It was not meant. Like, it is what it is. But for a lot of you out there, if you identify as a good girl, or that's something that you probably don't identify as, you don't even realize that about yourself, but you have to be extra careful, especially if you have low self-esteem. There are a lot of guys who prey on that. They have no conscience, like they have no guilt about these kind of things. It's sick. It really is. Moving on to my next point, which is somewhat related. You are good enough, but you don't value yourself. When I look back at how much pain I was in over this situation, again, I kind of find it funny sometimes. I feel like it's okay to feel heartbroken, But what I turned that story into and the narrative into for myself was that I always felt like I wasn't good enough for this person. I wasn't good enough to keep their attention. I wasn't good enough for them to not be interested in other people. And when I look back at that, I'm like, why did this person have so much power over me? A lot of the answer had nothing to do with that other person. It's that I didn't really like value myself. I didn't really see the value in myself. I felt like in some ways I expected, and a lot of people do, they expect that like with relationships or, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, they expect that the other person will fulfill you. Being with somebody is going to make you feel something. Even sometimes when I have conversations with my younger sister, you know, I try to explain stuff to her, like letting her know like, hey, like a relationship is not going to fulfill you. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's not going to, of course, we all want to be coupled. I mean, I don't want to say of course, but like a lot of people want to be with somebody, right? I think that's a natural thing. It's a human feeling to need people, you know? And yeah, that feeling of not being enough for somebody, whether it's your parents or your children or your siblings or your friends, lovers, whatever, it's just part of life. But it's a million times worse when you put all of your value into that. And I felt like for a long time, that's what I did. I really ruminated over the situation. I really obsessed over like the question of why. And it was just not important. It just wasn't important at all, actually. And to be honest, that wasn't even part of the equation. I mean, now I can see that. Now I can look back and say that had nothing to do with anything. It was never about whether I was good enough or not. That was not even a question. It was just not meant. And it was a lesson for me. And it was something for me to be guided to whatever was next, which was more important, which I'll get into later. But that gets me to my next point. And that is that your past and your upbringing will explain a lot of your attachment to a person or your broken heart. It will explain a lot of that. What do I mean by that? I mean, this one is like a lifelong thing, okay? There's no quick fix. It will take you a lifetime to understand why you do the things you do, why you feel the way that you do, why you go into these toxic patterns, why you obsess. You know, when I look at my own history, my own life, I felt like I had issues with, and I'm self-diagnosing, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like I had issues with limerence, which actually is connected to, is it PTSD? Complex PTSD. It's like you get obsessed and almost addicted to the feelings. Like I feel like there has been a part of me, and this is not just in romantic stuff, although limerence is that, where I almost get addicted to sadness and I get addicted to feeling sorry for myself. A lot of that can be explained through your past and your life, and that's going to take a lifetime to understand. But yeah, that's just one that I wanted to add in there, that sometimes we get attached to things like I'm a good girl, this, that, but it's so much more complex and so much deeper than that. It might take you forever to understand that. When you think you're a good girl and you've kind of been controlled by that narrative your whole life, you probably have some history to dig through, I'm sure. But moving on to my next point, your intuition is not going to fail you. I'm a big believer in being in touch with your intuition. I think that we're all guided and we all have like these really strong feelings that once you have some clarity in your life, you're able to like channel that. Okay. I knew instinctively in this situation never to share my feelings. I knew that this person, I was smart enough to understand this person would never choose me over that other person. Right. And I may have been innocent, good girl, but there was something in my bones that saved me from going through more pain, because on a deep level, I think I knew what I wanted and what I deserved, and I knew that this wasn't it. So as much as, you know, I want to play the naive good girl card, we all instinctively have that. We all know that. And we all sometimes give into the other side of things where we're not listening to our intuition, and we just want to follow like temporary, fleeting things. I know that there are people who have different philosophies in life. There are people who like taking risks, and there are people who like to be on the safe side. I would say depends on what we're talking about, but most of the time I like to stay on the safe side. I personally don't have any regrets, right? But there are people who believe in just pursuing everything, and that's good. Good for you. That's fine. Maybe that teaches you something. And sometimes people actually learn more from doing that. I feel like my intuition has not failed me in my life because everything that I have done up until this point has led me to Munir. I have no regrets. And I took a lot of risks even in my current relationship as well. And I'm so glad that I did. And that's why I say that your intuition will never fail you. If you just like have trust and you listen to it, it's going to take you where you need to go. And then my last piece of wisdom that I wish that I could tell myself, because I feel like I really struggled a lot with not being able to let go of things. You will not move on until you're truly ready and the timing is right. And you have to understand that. This is my last piece of wisdom for the good girls, for my younger self. I remember I got to a point where I was being ignored. I don't know. I was just being ignored. I had low self-worth. I felt like I could not just like let go. I could not move on from this pain or whatever it was. I had a night where I was like, I'm so done. Like, I actually made a decision. And it wasn't like one of those fleeting decisions like, then it was like, I'm done. Okay. And I remember that night I decided I will never, ever, ever, ever reach out to this person. I will never initiate a single conversation with this person, because this was after years of whatever, just feeling like not good enough. Right. I said, I am not going to do that. And I'm moving on. We're done. I'm done with this. I think I had so many years where I thought I did that. And maybe it was just the timing of my life. Maybe I kept trying to do that and it just wasn't working. But there was that night that I truly decided, and I think I was ready. I'm really grateful for that, because it made me understand that until you're ready and until the timing is right, things don't happen for you. You'll keep learning the same lessons over and over again, the more you keep going back to the same patterns over and over again. And what's funny about this whole thing is that it wasn't actually too long after that Munir came into my life. It really wasn't that long. I also give this advice to my sister all the time that like, hey man, like you want the right thing to come at the right time. You don't want to waste time on things that are not for you. You don't want to be distracted. You don't want to go through those things. And I even had friends who I would not put in the category of good girl. I wouldn't put them in that at all. They were actually bad girl in the category. But I remember like even them, and that's why I also appreciated friends who always were there for me and never judged me for being good girl or whatever, even if they weren't like me. I remember her saying to me, like, she was like, listen, like if I could take back all of it and just be with one person, I would do that. And that really also validated me. I was like, because you don't usually hear that, you know, from people. People are like, I live no regrets. But her being honest about that and saying like, all those things don't mean anything. If you had one person that it meant, and actually I heard this from multiple people actually before. I just remembered another person who said something similar, that they would just take it all back with all the other people who didn't mean anything to them. So just know that Tazzy is here to validate you. And I hope you guys enjoyed. That's all I have for you. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay? All right. Tazzy Fang out. Bye. Good girls, bad girls. Woo.